A very good morning to you and welcome to a new day here on Signature TV. My name is Godwin Sunday. We're broadcasting live from Abuja, Nigeria's political capital. This morning, we were talking about social media and its narrative in Nigeria. What are some of the things that people hold sway to the social media? Are there social media advantages? Are there disadvantages? How best are we regulating the social media space to our own advantage? What should be done in terms of the cyberbullying and other factors that have tend to defame people, especially within the Nigerian space using the social media? We've had a lot of stories that are spring forth due to social media influences. But then I'm not alone in this conversation. I've been joined by a technology and international development expert who will be shedding light to this conversation, and he is Kosiso Rice. You're welcome to Signature. Welcome to Signature today.
Thank you, Godwin. Thank you for having me.
All right, so today we'll be talking about these issues about social media narratives in Nigeria. But we tend to see social media evolved over time. But tell us, what is the narrative right now in social media space?
Okay, so for the most part, social media right now has been an avenue for young people to express their frustrations. It has been an avenue for young people to mobilize, to put together their collective voice. And I feel like social media is incredibly important, especially in this time period. If you look at its history, looking back from the events of NSAS and the recent protests and how social media has been used to galvanize activity, I think that for the most part social media has a very incredible role to play. Social media is very important in society, notwithstanding the side effects like you mentioned. But I think that social media has an absolutely important part to play.
All right, so many people will say that the social media has become more of a curse than a blessing to Nigeria. Do you agree with this submission?
Well, I look at activities on social media as I look at it as a combination of the events that happen in society. For example, if you look at the activities of people online in more developed countries, it is more humane, it is more civil. Social media is a lot quieter there. But if you look at activities in developing countries, it takes a whole different form. So I do feel like the events on social media are just an extension of events that happen in real time, as like those events are a product of society, of activities in society.
All right, so let's talk about social media from the angle of age brackets. We've seen more teenagers get glued to their phone. Are you then saying that if teenagers get involved with social media, and at that point nobody can even correct them or what they do on the social media space? We've seen a lot of disrespect that are spring forth from the social media space. I ask again, is this a blessing or a curse?
Okay, so definitely social media addiction is a thing. Studies have shown that it can be very detrimental to mental health. Not just the addiction itself, but there are other things that come with consistent exposure to social media. Things like children begin to compare themselves with other people. It's that comparison and how it affects self-esteem. It's actually a side effect, which I think right now big social media giants like Meta and Twitter are beginning to pay attention to those things. People are beginning to cut down on infinite scrolling, and social media giants like Instagram are now, for example, just yesterday, Instagram has now set a default to put the social media accounts of teenagers. So people who register and say that they're below 18, their accounts are automatically put on private. so as to restrict the kind of content that they have access to and the people who have access to their content. So I feel like this is a huge issue, and social media giants are beginning to pay attention, and I feel like the onus is on the government to put more pressure, you know, to pay attention to mental health and to put more pressure to ensure that policies are put in place to combat, you know, some of the side effects of social media.
All right, so again, we've seen conversations around the social media space, but then people have said that the social media has made people more dumb than even becoming audible, because we don't see people coming out to address issues these days. They do it via the phones, relationships spring forth on the phone. So in terms of communication, has the social media been able to champion the narrative for effective communication so far?
So I think in respect to that, the good thing about social media is, for example, I use Twitter as an example. Twitter is a marketplace of some sorts. So you hear everybody's voice, you know, and that's the thing about social media. Not everybody's voice is going to match yours. Some people's voices are going to be different. Some people are going to say different things, right? And the sad part is then that because it's over keyboard, you're not able to properly get the context of what they're saying, you know. But if it is a question of if people's voices have been heard over social media, absolutely. I think that it has been incredible for people to voice their concerns. You know, it has been an incredible channel for people to say exactly how they feel about situations, about events, about the things that happen in society.
So I'm asking that to ask, has social media been able to change the narrative of physical conversations?
Of course, absolutely, but not nearly in a good way, I would say. So because, for example, I'll use Twitter as an example again. Twitter has a cap of about 150 letters, and what that has done is it has people. So before, you used to need to listen to long conversations to get context. Now, as a contributor on Twitter, you have to find a way to condense all of the context that you want to put into 150 characters. So what has then happened is people's capacity for long attention span has reduced. So now, because that attention span has reduced, context is different now. Now you have to have shorter conversations, and you have to be able to present your thoughts, your opinion in shorter periods of time. You know, and that has in so many ways changed even the way people consume content, even the way people consume videos. Now you see videos are 1-2 minutes short. They, you know, it's things are becoming very short form. So has social media changed the context of conversations? Absolutely. I think that it has.
All right, so when one opens and gets to social media, one thing that has been consistent is the basketballs, if you like to use that word, on the social media space. And so use the case of the Very Dark Man and the Yoruba actress, and the Yabo Ju as a case study. One begin to ask, has social media now become the narrative around social media? Has it come to enhance disrespect and relegate the African culture to its back door?
So again, I'd say this: social media is an extension of events that happen real time in society. So it's not a question of the only thing it has done is amplified, but these things, people have existed from time. You understand? These things, these conditions in society have existed, and people, you know, being insulting others, people being rude to others. These things have existed.
Well, it wasn't this high.
But that's because social media has now amplified it.
So it is amplifying and eradicating the culture of respect.
Well, as regards, again, I'd say this: as regards respect, I think that respect is it goes a lot deeper than than just social media. And I'd say this because when I was, so I remember when I was in school, you know, we're taught a lot of moral lessons, you know, and I feel like there are a lot of things that there are a lot of principles, right, that are currently lacking, right, and those principles are not lacking because of the presence of social media. Those principles are simply lacking because, you know, they are just lacking from teaching, you know, young children morals, from teaching them standard principles, being good to others. So you see a society where, look, a society where people are not good to others offline, they're not going to be good to others online. And it's not, so the social media is not the problem. Being able to instill principles in people, you know, in young children, in young adults, being able to instill principles in them offline will change the narrative online. That's the secret. Social media just amplifies. That's what it does.
All right, since it amplifies, we have this culture right now of content developers.
Yes.
We have a lot of people that are the trendy one of the go dance.
I love that trend.
They go. I think I know how to do that dance. All right, but then looking at all of these trends and content development within the social media space, we've come to also understand that social media has become an enhancer for people to become wealthy. But then we've seen a lot of fake lives, even on the social media space. Let's talk about this trend on social media. Again, as the social media come to eradicate the culture of hard work and dedication to service, has it come to completely eradicate it? Because we've seen more teenagers getting, more younger persons getting addicted to it by, see right now people dance on the road, say they're building content for one social media or the other. Has this come to eradicate or make them working more effective?
So again, I'd say we go back to what society is like. We're currently in a country where a huge percentage of the nation lives under $1 a day. There's quite a lot of poverty, and you know, like the economy, like almost 94%. I think I saw a survey that was done last month, and it said almost 94% of Nigerians don't feel like the economy is going the way that it should go. And when you're coming from that, point of view, you realize that people are desperate to make money. People are desperate to make something of themselves. You know, because you live in a society where people are, a lot of times people respect money, people respect wealth, and not just, it's not about just respecting wealth, it's about having dignity of life. And in a place where there is a high percentage of the population live in poverty, people will now need to put in extra or do more to have dignity of life. And I say dignity of life because that's the bottom line of it, dignity of life. If you look at a stark contrast in Europe, where people have dignity of life, people who it doesn't matter what level you are or what work you're doing, you have dignity of life, you have good standards of living, you have dignity of life. So if you contrast that, you see how much different the use of social media is. You see that people would then be pushed to do more. People have to do more. So you cannot blame them for taking up trends or trying to create content, because that, for them, it's a source of income, and it's what it is. People have to survive. People need dignity of life, and if that's what it takes to get that, because the good thing about social media is the barrier for entry is very low. As long as you have a phone, you have an internet connection, you can download the app online, create an account, that's it, boom, you're there. So the barrier for entry is very low, and hey, if I'm able to make some money from it, why not? You know, I do something, I'm having fun while doing it, and I'm making money from it. It might not necessarily, so I understand your context of maybe your point of view of it eroding the principles of wealth in society or the African culture. But the truth is, while the economy is degrading, so many things are going to go with it. So if we need to conserve culture, we need to figure out how to give the people dignity of life and better standards of living. If not, we are like, our culture and our principles are going to get eroded, and just not much that we're going to be able to do about it.
Interesting. But then again, among your peers in the social media development and also social media consultations, we've also realized that there are no blueprints that tends to regulate the social media space, especially in Nigeria, to upload and to regulate the Nigerian thought lines. So should we now say that the challenge with the social media has largely come from a consultant like yourself, an expert like yourself, that has not been able to develop a blueprint for the regulation of the social media space? Or who should we be channeling this old decadence of the social that the social media is trying to throw to the Nigerian space? Who should be able to brace up and take responsibility for this action?
So I think here the onus is largely on the government, and it's a very tricky situation. Censorship on social media is a very tricky situation because it takes just a little for it to be too much. You know, it takes, the lines are very blurred. So there's a very the difference between you just censoring and, you know, you being, and it looking like a dictatorship. It's very blurred. So it needs stakeholders to come together in conjunction with these social media companies to say, look, we need to figure out what is okay, what is not. And I think that that's already happening. You know, like, social media companies are beginning to take note of some of these things. For example, maybe posts or tweets that are, you know, that go against certain principles, posts or tweets that defame people, posts or tweets that that suggest violence towards women. You know, these platforms are beginning to be sensitive to these things, but it needs, these platforms need more stakeholders. We need to come to the table and we need to say, okay, what is acceptable and what is not? And it needs to be a very sensitive approach. So you have to approach it from a point of human rights. What is acceptable? What infringes on human rights? So you have to push it just up to the point where you are not infringing on people's human rights, people's right to speech. So there needs to be more action taken, for example, things like on cyberbullying, you know, and the definition of cyberbullying, you know. So I think that these things, I think it's a thing that stakeholders need to come together, including the government. The onus here is on the government. The government needs to drive things, but it needs to do it in a balanced and sensitive way so that it does not infringe on the human rights of users.
All right, thank you so much. When we look at international space, the social media has attempted to form the basics of Nigerian narrative. Whether people perceive us rightly or wrongly, positive or negative, social media has contributed largely to the perceptions of Nigerians. You know, people will say that Nigerians are this and Nigerians are that, but then the social media has contributed again to that narrative. So I'm asking at this point, again, should we be talking about changing the narrative of social media, or should we be talking about the clauses of moderating the social media in such a way that Nigerians can, information within Nigeria that is going out of Nigeria can be gauged in such a way that it doesn't deter us as a country?
Okay, so you remember when I was talking about how you need to censor to the point where, when it gets to the point where it begins to infringe on human rights, then you need to stop. Now, the truth is, I would always go back to changing the narrative in society. The truth is, we don't have, like, there's not very much going well. We don't have very much going well for us right now as a country, and we're at the point where, you know, subsidy has just been removed. You know, there's so much economic upheaval because of, you know, the new policies, and it's going to take a while for us to see the outcome of these policies. But for now, we're not exactly in a great place. And the truth is, if society itself is not in a great place, that is going to reflect in how they communicate with the world, or the information that goes out. Now, if we want to be able to change that narrative, we need to begin to look inwards. Because the mistake that a lot of people have made is assuming that social media is everything. Social media is simply, or the activities on social media is simply an interpretation of the events that happen in society. So if we want to change that projection, we need to look inwards. We need to begin to look at events in society. We need to begin to look at our economy. What is happening? Where is what happening? How can we change this? For example, if the narrative is, oh, there's a lot of hunger, right? Then to me, that immediately means, okay, we need to pay attention to agriculture. We need to pay attention to we need to pay food farming. We need to pay attention to the prices of things in the market. You know, if the prices of things in the market comes down, that narrative will change on social media. But you saying, okay, we need to change the voices, we need to change the narratives, people are always going to tell their story. And if you say, okay, we need to change your story, changing your story or taking away your reality is infringing on your human right. So if we want to change that narrative, we want to change Nigeria's narrative on social media, we need to pay attention to our economy, we need to pay attention to our society.
No, so I asked that question because I know you're well traveled, and in a place like China, in a place even in the Britain, they have their own challenge. But then I think there's a way they've been able to curtail the information. I know China does that a lot, where information that would deter and defame their country doesn't go out. Will it be wrong if Nigeria begins to look and begin to take similar approach in curtailing information? Now, for example, the government can now say that if there's price of foodstuffs are going up, we can now say regulate it in such a way that Nigerians know it. It trends within the Nigerian social media space, but it doesn't go out. Can't we have a similar policy and get it work for us here?
Well, I wouldn't say that the China approach is ideal. And I say that because there is so much of the Chinese political approach that that might not be good for us, right? And when it comes to censorship, one of the reasons why China took that route for censorship for, you know, things, economic activities and things that happen within the country, is because China was trying to boost investor confidence in the country so that people could come in, people could, you know. Now the truth is, when those investors do come in, they are going to find out the exact situation in the country. Investors spend a lot of money doing research. People spend money doing research. Except if you want to go the route of North Korea and say, okay, we don't want people in our, or we don't accept visitors in our country, except you want to do that. But no matter what you do, no matter how much you censor, people are going to find out what the exact situation is. So that amount of, and I don't think that approach is ideal. It's not, the China approach is not ideal. China's political, there's so much about China's political approach that is it's not very ideal. So I think that while they've done that and it looks like it works, on the back end, it doesn't really solidify investor confidence, because then investors come in and then they realize that, oh, we've been lied to. Then they begin to tread carefully. And very recently, in fact, that has somewhat backfired, because very recently there's been a situation where there are companies, startups that have built infrastructure, so much infrastructure, housing infrastructure, and all of that housing infrastructure is empty because angels, investors slow down, because the truth is people need information. People need to know what's happening. If I'm going to travel, or if I'm going to make investments, I need to know what's happening in the country. So while we might think, oh, it might not work very well for, you know, our outlook, right? It's actually okay, so that investors know exactly what they're walking into. People know exactly what they're walking into. People can feel security, not because they think that everything is fine, but because they know exactly what the situation is. That means that people know when, or for example, non-profit organizations know when they can send you foreign aid. And some of these things are that openness, that willingness to be open and say, look, this is exactly what's happening. This is what our situation is like. And rather than pay attention to what it looks like, we pay attention to actually solving the problem. I think that that's a much better approach than the China approach.
All right, so let me bring you back home.
Okay.
So recently we just concluded the Abuja Social Media Summit.
Yes.
A lot of concerns were also raised during that summit. And one of those concerns that was raised is the issue of Nigerians not patronizing Nigerian-made social media platforms and social and applications have been developed to solve basic problems in Nigeria. Could censorship be one of those reasons why Nigerians are afraid to use made in Nigerian applications?
Absolutely. I would say absolutely, because if you have a situation where people have learned to distrust their government, it creates a problem, because that means that if I distrust my government, that means, so for example, if the social media app comes up, you know, and government has, you know, control, or like there's government control over it, I wouldn't want to do very much there. I wouldn't want to be, especially in a situation where people have had experiences where they've spoken out and they have been, you know, or either they have been picked up or something has happened. At that point, people lose trust. Because the last thing that you want is for your people to lose trust in you, because then there's not much that you can do. So even if we create homegrown products, people would not want to patronize, often because they don't trust the source. So it becomes a problem. This is one of the reasons why so many people, for example, you go to countries like Switzerland. Switzerland have very amazing media laws. You go to places like the US, the UK, people can use those platforms because they trust that their data is being protected. Now, that is one of the reasons why a lot of companies in the US, a lot of social media companies in the US are growing the way they are growing, because of business laws. Because when you come to the courts do not favor the government. So because I know that the courts are impartial, I know that my data is being protected, my data is being protected, and I know that my data is being protected, then I can trust. So it's a game of trust. If the government wants, or if the government wants if the government wants people, its population, to use homegrown products, it needs to step up. It needs to say, look, okay, we have you covered. And it needs to show it. So that when people come out, when people voice their concerns, when people say, look, this is happening and I don't like it, they are sure, or they are assured of their safety. That way people will look back. But if you want people to patronize homegrown products, there's a price to pay. Democracy is
Royce, we'll come back to that conversation. we'll definitely come back to it. Yeah. Well, if you're just joining us, this is still New Day on Signature TV. And of course, we're talking to Royce, who is a technology and international development expert, and is putting us through on some of the social media narratives that we have in Nigeria. But then just before we go further, let me bring your attention again back to Nigeria. One of the issues that were also raised in the course of the Abuja Social Media Summit was the issues of the enacted laws in Nigeria. And for many, this does not better describe and better narrate the Nigerian story and project Nigerian for the future in terms of social media narratives. Do you think that they are correct in this? In the words of theirs, that the social media act that's been put in place does not support young people, and it does not have the ingredients that can stand the test of time. How correct is this?
I think to some point, I think that it is correct because, again, like I said, it's a game of trust. Not very much happens without trust. Policies run on trust. For example, if I say that the reason why somebody wouldn't beat a traffic light is because he trusts that if he beats the traffic light, he would be arrested. So there is that there's a definitive action there, and a lot of that has been missing in the system here. So even with the Social Media Act, people are distrustful, because they think, okay, you've brought this to us, right? So this is the Social Media Act, right? First of all, there are items in there that infringe on our rights.
But I thought before that law was enacted, there was enough consultation from various angles, and also stakeholders within the social media space, and also international laws and cyber laws. They brainstormed before coming out with that law. So I'm surprised that the same body will now fault a law that they were consulted to create.
Yeah, but if there is now a fault in the law, then that means that not enough consultation was done, or maybe it was not looked at from all of the angles. It's what it is. If you say, okay, we've gone and we've done consultations, and this is the result of the consultations, and we've put it together in an act, and when that act comes, there is kickback or there's pushback, then that means that not enough consultations have been done. Maybe there are certain groups or demographic who have not been taken into consideration. And the beautiful thing about acts and the law is it has to be open to change. It has to be open to discussions. So if you say, okay, look, this is the act, we've done consultations, and this is where we are, and we need to enact this, right? Then as subsequently we can continue to make changes to these laws. And you have, again, that's why I said it boils down to trust. So people need to trust that when they raise their voices, that act is open to change. And I think that once fears have been allayed, and once people say, okay, or once people see the willingness on the part of the government to change some of these laws or to be open to change, then I think it would be more amenable.
All right. So you spoke about the fact that most Nigerians are skeptical and afraid of even patronizing the Made in Nigerian app. And I want to ask at this point, what if the database for saving the informations are not even centered in Nigeria? Is there still room for being skeptical just because it's been made by Nigerians?
Yes, well, the thing about databases is databases can be stored anywhere, AWS, MongoDB, there's a whole lot of services, and the truth is, at the end of the day, it boils down to access. So even if it is stored in, even if your servers are located in Thailand or wherever it is in the world, as long as there's somebody, or the government has somebody who has access is key. So technically access his key.
No, because it looks as though that because once you hear like for example, Sadiq created an app, the Green Book, and all of a sudden, because he is a Nigerian, the narrative now becomes that is a made in Nigerian app product on social media cannot be trusted. So we need to change this narrative. That's what I'm asking. What if we have a situation where the app, the database for this app is stored somewhere outside the country, and the government does not have access to that app? Can that app or a social media brand, can it still be trusted? Not minding if it's just take out the Nigerian out of it and look at the creation in that production.
I think there's a possibility, and which I think is one of the, I think that is a very huge possibility, which is why a lot of the fintech apps that we have now, a lot of them are registered in the state of Delaware in the US, quite a number are registered in the UK, quite a number are registered in Switzerland. And you have to go to certain steps to prove beyond reasonable doubt that, okay, your data is absolutely safe. And I think that it is something that if Sadiq decides to pick up, I think that it is absolutely possible. But it's going to be expensive. That's the thing, it's going to be expensive. So if it is something that he's willing to pick up, that's absolutely amazing. But you have to prove to Nigerians beyond reasonable doubt that they are safe.
And no other way to change his narrative.
There's not. See, that's the thing, right? So that's
because
the thing.
We're looking at changing the narrative that if an app, a social media brand, or an app is created by Nigeria, there should be some level of trust that Nigerians can deliver. So not minding, because as it stands right now, it's become like a recurrent thing where an app created by a Nigerian, Nigerians turn blind eyes to apps that's created by Nigeria. But we tend to patronize more. I know when Nigerians throw their weight to a thing, it succeeds. Nigeria, look at the case of what social media did to the likes of Macaroni, the likes of Ashake, the likes of Tenny, the likes of the singers and in the entertainment space. When Nigerians threw their backs at them, even the brain jota itself, of the go, like we mentioned earlier. If Nigerians throw their weight on you, things work right. But when it comes to the tech space and the social media creation as a brand, we see Nigerians turn a blind eye and a deaf eye, if you like to use that word, on the made in Nigerian social media brand. And I'm asking, how do we change this narrative as it stands?
Okay, so before I begin, I want to tell you that it's going to take a while for that narrative to go away. And second of all, this space needs stability. Now, for example, I'll give you an example of something that an experience that let me use a personal experience now. So I was using a certain app, and I had some money stored on I had some money on the app, and then after a while I was just told, oh, the app has closed down, and you know, I wasn't able to retrieve the money that I had there. Now, there are thousands of Nigerians who have had that same experience. In fact, some people more often than others. And so if there is going to be trust, or if that trust is going to be regained, or if Nigerians are going to go back to those products, then there has to be a certain level of stability. There has to be good regulation, not over-regulation, but good regulation. The government needs to be able to provide support for startups, for technology startups. The government needs to provide some sort of sandbox, so to say. So if you are running this, you understand, we keep our eye on you. If you are unable to keep up, we provide you some support. Because the truth is, it is to be fair to founders of tech startups and and these companies, to be fair to them, it is difficult running a company in this economic environment and providing the stability that that company needs to continue to serve for the long term. So the onus is now on the government, just the same way it provides companies in the US like SpaceX, who are provided subsidies by the government so that they can get that push that they need to create stability for the company. Stability is everything. if you're able to provide stability and the safety of data, that trust will begin to come back. And I think that's absolutely key.
That's absolutely key. Interesting. As we begin to want to start packing our things, to want to get set to leave the studio, there's also a conversation that borders on the narratives of Nigerians on the social media space, but this time in terms of, I know we've mentioned cyberbullying, but then in terms of phishing and also hacking, and also that of multiple accounts by one user on the social media space. We've seen that happen, and this has often led to fraud on the social media space. We see male masquerading as female, females masquerading as male, and all of this thing happening on the social media space. As social media experts, one begin to ask, are there applications, are there things that one can be able to use to fathom who owns an account? How many times this person has opened an account? Are there regulatory framework in this regard, just to change the narrative on the social media space?
So, at this juncture, there's not very much, except for what the social media platforms are doing, like for example using closing down accounts that originate from multiple accounts that originate from one IP address. There's not very much that people are doing right now, but the good thing is there is an opportunity for the government to come in to say, okay, we need to begin to teach our people. Social media is an avenue, it's a very beautiful avenue to teach people. People have learned so many skills from social media. So as regards phishing, cyberbullying, you need to be able to come out and say and put out consistent information. And I liken this to, for example, the same way we approached, or the same approach to polio or malaria. We need to take it head on. And you need to have campaigns sensitizing people. Okay, this is what you do. This is what a phishing attack looks like. This is what a man in the middle attack looks like. So by the time you begin to give people some of this information, by the time you begin to educate people, it's all about investing in educating people. For the most part, right now, that's the most that we can do. Invest in educating people. Invest in campaigns that sensitize people on what attacks look like, what they should look out for, information that should be private. It's sensitizing people. The more that you do that, the more that people are aware, the less they would fall for these things.
All right. So I'm asking that question because of the fact that during the course of the EndSARS and bad governance protests, we saw Nigerians come out in mass to protest and to support that protest. We came out in mass. But again, a lot of Nigerians have been defrauded on the social media space, not once, not twice, and it has become like a whisper around that I was defrauded. Like you just mentioned right now, you were using a particular app and you had funds in it and it got missing, and all of these narratives. So I'm asking on this table at this point in time, are there modalities that can be put in place to change this narrative? Can we have something like a people demonstration? People that have been defrauded. Is it not possible for social media experts like yourself to champion a cause that will bring Nigerians out? So if you say the government should treat it like we're treating malaria and other form of sickness, can't we also treat this as a vice and campaign against it? Shut down the streets or shut down the social media platform just to ensure that we change the narrative of Nigerians to Nigerians on the social media space.
Again, I think that it is a again, I would say that it is a game of trust. So the thing about campaigns is campaigns take a lot of resource, they take a lot of time, energy, right? And I think Nigerians are getting to the point where they've realized that if we're going to invest that much energy, if we're going to invest that much time, it needs to be on the government that's listening. So the government listening is very critical, because then it means that when situations like this come up, or when things like this come up, we trust you to listen to what we're saying and take action. So we don't need you to see it like we are trying to attack you, or we're trying to say, oh, that you're not doing things right. We're not, like, that's not the narrative. The narrative is, look, there are issues, there are these things on ground, these things have happened. We need stronger regulation here. We need to enforce the rule of law. We need to revitalize our justice system. When the justice system works, it makes it makes other people not want to commit crime. When the justice system works. But if people have committed crime, if it is a situation where you've seen people commit crime, or people have done things and those people are walking around scot-free, other people would be incentivized to commit crime, because the justice system doesn't seem to be holding people accountable. So the government needs to be at the point where it listens and trusts that the people's voices are honest and genuine. Listen to them. Okay, this is what you're saying. Okay, that's fine. Have, again, stakeholders, call stakeholders and say, and listen to stakeholders. This is what we want done. These are our frustrations, and this is what we want done. Until we get to that point, investing in protests or investing in campaigns to inform the government, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of resources, a lot of funding, it's a lot of organizing, it's a lot of time. So if we're going to invest all of that, we need to be sure that the government is listening. And until we get to that point, we might not see a lot of protests like that.
So lastly, there's this issue of all of a sudden millionaires emerging from the social media space. At first, it was first believed that it was due to fake life. People try to fake it till they make it. But all of a sudden, we are seeing a lot of these inadequacies that are, how do we change this narrative of sudden millionaires on the social media space? Or is the social media designed to make people overnight millionaires? I've not seen legitimate cases on Twitter and X, currently X, where the woman was waking early enough to take care of her husband, and Nigeria started contributing money for her. I don't know if you saw that. People even gave her land, landed properties and what have you. But then, you wake up in the morning, you get to the social media space, you see people asking you for funds, and we see millionaires emerge. And this old narrative, Africans begin to perceive Nigerian in a different light when it has to do with the social media space. How do we correct these abnormalities, even on the social media space, if at all it's an abnormality?
So I don't think it's necessarily an abnormality. I think that, again, events happen, like sometimes these things happen in society, and I think it's just a reflection. We then see that on social media, but a certain context that I think people share a lot now is like you mentioned, like what seems like fake life, or people consistently lying on social media that they have a certain kind of wealth that they don't. And the thing about social media is, because it's very impersonal, it is easy to create what looks like a good life, right? And oftentimes people do that because they feel like they have to have any sense of dignity or worth in society, because you are now living in a society where people value you by how much wealth or how much money or how much value you can provide. So oftentimes people now feel like they have to create a narrative, they have to make themselves look a certain way. So it might not be millionaires, it might not be plenty millionaires, necessarily, evolving out of social media. It might just be people who now have access to social media and are now creating a false sense of wealth. So I think that might be the case. I think that might be the case. And again, it will now boil down to the economy and the way that society is. If we can give people dignity of life, and if we can give them a sense of social security, people would not feel like they have to consistently create a false narrative to be worth something.
So that's the way to go right now.
That's the way to go.
Right, so we'll continue this conversation on social media and the Nigerian narrative. We will not even exhaust it on this table. I want to say thank you so much for being a part of New Day today.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, viewers, you've heard it all. I want to encourage you to follow us on all our social media handles to join the conversation, because the conversation never stops on this table. It continues on our various social media handle, so that is already displayed on the screen. And let's get your take on the various social media narrative. And of course, the government is paying attention to us right now, so we have to drop this one token to the government for them to take and add to the policy formulations and blueprints for us to have a better and more proactive cyberspace even in Nigeria. Until I come your way again, I am Godwin Sunday. On behalf of myself and my entire crew, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Do enjoy the rest of your day. It's bye for now.